The forward operating base sat in the middle of a barren desert, its metal structures rattling each time the evening wind swept across the sand. Inside the main briefing hall, fluorescent lights flickered overhead, illuminating a room crowded with soldiers from different units. Marines slouched in chairs with crossed arms, Rangers leaned against the walls, and a group of SEALs occupied the front row with their usual quiet confidence. The air smelled of fuel, gun oil, and tension, a blend familiar to everyone stationed there. They had been summoned for an urgent night operation. But the real buzz in the room came from a rumor passed among the ranks. Command had assigned a special pilot, someone apparently so skilled that the SEAL captain personally requested them. With no name given, the imaginations in the room filled in the blanks. They expected a tall, battle-scarred male aviator, maybe someone with a reputation so legendary people whispered his call sign in awe. And because that was the image everyone had built in their minds, anything that didn't match it became an easy target for mockery. In the back corner of the room sat Lieutenant Arya Hale, quiet and unnoticed. She wore a simple, clean flight suit, no rows of ribbons, no patches announcing her experience, no swagger in her posture. Her dark hair was tied neatly behind her, and she studied the mission folder in her lap with calm focus. She wasn't trying to blend in, but she also wasn't trying to stand out. That alone made her invisible in a room full of loud personalities. Conversations drifted around her. "Bet it's Harper from the 160th, one Marine joked. "Nah, maybe Ghost Hand from the A10 squadron," another replied. Then someone snickered. "Watch it be that tiny girl back there." The laughter spread quickly. It wasn't cruel, at least not intentionally. It came from assumptions shaped by countless years of seeing the same type of pilot take charge in the most dangerous missions. Arya didn't react. She kept reading, her breathing steady, her expression unreadable. She had heard worse, lived through worse, and survived enough in her career that a few mocking voices didn't shake her. At exactly 1800 hours, the side door swung open. Captain Rhodes, the SEAL team leader, stepped in. He walked with purpose, his presence immediately commanding the entire room. He slammed the folder onto the podium, scanned the crowd, and spoke in a low, authoritative voice. "The mission will require a precision extraction under hostile fire. For this, command assigned one combat pilot. When I call for them, stand." The room straightened. Muscles tensed. The anticipation thickened. Captain Rhodes asked, "Who here is our pilot?" The question echoed for a moment. Everyone waited for a large man to rise, someone intimidating, someone loud, someone who looked the part. But no one moved. Someone whispered, "Where is he?" A Marine laughed, another elbowed his friend, and a Ranger shook his head with impatience. Then, slowly, in the back corner of the room, Arya closed her folder, placed it gently on the seat beside her, and rose from her chair. The laughter didn't just stop, it died. It collapsed into a breathless, uneasy silence. Every head turned, every assumption shattered. She stood straight, her face calm but unyielding. No bravado, no dramatic pose. Just a steady gaze meeting the entire room, daring none of them to dismiss her again. Captain Rhodes nodded in approval, not looking surprised in the slightest. "There's your pilot," he said. "Try not to choke on your doubts." In that moment, the room that had laughed at her just seconds earlier finally realized they hadn't been waiting for the pilot they imagined. They had been waiting for the one they never saw coming. The silence in the briefing room lingered long after Arya Hale stood. Men who had been cracking jokes moments earlier now watched her with a mixture of confusion, embarrassment, and something they hadn't expected to feel: curiosity. Captain Rhodes stepped forward, his boots echoing across the tiled floor, and stopped beside Arya with a firm, almost protective stance. "Since some of you seem surprised," he said calmly, "let me make this clear. Lieutenant Arya Hale isn't just a pilot. "She's the pilot." He let the words hang, watching the shift in their expressions. A few soldiers straightened unconsciously, as if correcting their earlier disrespect. Rhodes continued, his tone steady but weighted with meaning. "She was handpicked for the Air Force Thunderbirds before she ever turned 25. She earned her wings faster than any pilot in her class. And yes, she has more combat flight hours than half the people in this room combined." Whispers rippled through the crowd, soft but sharp. Arya kept her eyes down, uncomfortable with the attention. She never liked hearing her record described. To her, the achievements weren't trophies, they were scars disguised as accolades. But Rhodes wasn't finished. "Most of you know about the Red Ridge crash 2 years ago," he said. A hush fell immediately. Everyone knew the story. An impossible emergency landing during a sandstorm, a cockpit fire that should have killed the pilot, and a classified rescue that only a handful of people survived. The pilot who pulled off that landing, the one everyone assumed was a man, was her. A few jaws actually dropped. Arya felt heat rise in her chest, not from pride, but from memory. The crash wasn't a moment she liked revisiting. She could still feel the burning metal, the suffocating smoke, the weight of the 2 injured soldiers she dragged out while half-conscious. Her survival wasn't mythical, it was painful, violent, and far too real for hero worship. She lifted her eyes, meeting the room's gaze for the first time. "I'm not here for applause," she said quietly. "I'm here to fly the mission. That's all." Her voice was soft but carried a firmness that silenced every lingering doubt. Even those who still didn't fully understand her capabilities could sense something unshakable beneath the surface: discipline, resilience, and a confidence that didn't need volume to be heard. Captain Rhodes stepped aside, giving her space but also making it clear she had earned every ounce of respect in the room. From that moment, nobody looked at her as the quiet girl in the corner anymore. They looked at her as the pilot who survived the impossible and was ready to do it again. Night swallowed the desert as the team boarded the modified combat aircraft. The engines hummed with a deep metallic growl, vibrating through the steel floor beneath their boots. Inside the dimly lit cabin, every soldier secured their gear, still processing the transformation of their assumptions. Some sneaked glances at Arya as she strapped into the cockpit, adjusting switches and preparing the systems with calm, practiced precision. She didn't look nervous. She looked focused, like someone stepping into a world she understood better than the ground. She walked on. Captain Rhodes passed by the cockpit and gave her a simple nod. She returned it without words. They both knew what awaited beyond the base perimeter: a hostile valley controlled by insurgents, lined with anti-aircraft weapons, and notorious for downing aircraft foolish enough to enter without understanding its terrain. Most pilots avoided it unless forced. Arya chose to fly into it tonight. The moment the wheels lifted off, the plane sliced upward through the darkness. Outside, the stars hung like frozen sparks, but Arya's attention stayed locked on the instruments and the shifting shadows of the terrain. She guided the aircraft low, skimming just above the desert floor to avoid detection. The cabin behind her grew tense as soldiers watched the ridges rise closer and closer to the windows. Then it began. A burst of tracer rounds erupted from the mountainside, streaking toward the aircraft like burning needles. Warning alarms flared, glowing red across the cockpit. Voices rose in panic behind her, but Arya's voice cut through the chaos, steady, controlled, unshaken. "Hold on. We're going silent." With a sharp turn of the controls, she dropped the aircraft into a narrow canyon, tilting it at an angle so steep one soldier swore his stomach left his body. The canyon walls blurred past them at terrifying speed. A missile lock sounded, shrill and urgent. But Arya reacted with impossible timing, deploying flares, banking sharply, and using the canyon's curve to break the lock. Her movements were instinct, not merely training. She flew like she could feel the wind itself. Like every shift in pressure whispered the right move before the instruments registered it. Behind her, the soldiers who doubted her now gripped their restraints, wide-eyed and breathless. The woman they once laughed at was outmaneuvering weapons designed to kill them all, when she finally cleared the last ridge, and the valley opened before them. Even the most skeptical Marine whispered under his breath, "Holy hell! She's unreal." But Arya didn't celebrate. She simply breathed out, reset her grip, and said, approaching the extraction point, "Prepare for the hard part." The valley opened into a fractured landscape of jagged rocks, burning wreckage, and flickering shadows. Arya lowered the aircraft toward the extraction zone, an uneven stretch of broken earth surrounded by steep ridgelines that funneled enemy fire like a death trap. Most pilots would have circled, waited, or called off the approach entirely. Arya did none of those things. She eased the aircraft into a hover, so precise it felt as if the machine obeyed her thoughts rather than the controls beneath her fingers. 60 seconds, she said calmly. Move. The back ramp dropped, and the Marines sprinted into the hellish terrain, weapons raised. Dust blasted into the cabin, mixing with sparks drifting down from the burning ridges. Gunfire erupted instantly. Tracer rounds cracked against the rocks just meters from the aircraft. The extraction team located the trapped squad, pinned behind a collapsed vehicle, dragging them one by one toward the waiting bird. Every second stretched thin. Every heartbeat measured. Captain Rhodes leaned toward the cockpit. "We're getting hammered out here." Arya didn't respond emotionally. She didn't need to. Her eyes narrowed, her grip tightened ever so slightly, and she pushed the aircraft upward, gaining just enough altitude to perform a maneuver no one expected. "Strap in," she warned. Then she banked sharply to the right, swinging the aircraft around the ridgeline in a tight arc. As enemy trucks roared forward to intercept the Marines, Arya unleashed a volley of precise strafing fire, clearing a safe corridor with flawless timing. Explosions lit the night like violent bursts of daylight, giving the team the precious seconds they needed. She lined up for another run, flying dangerously low, so low that the skids nearly scraped the rocks. It was reckless for most pilots, but for Arya it was calculated, controlled, mastered. She cut the engines to a whisper on the final pass, using the silence to confuse the enemy before. She roared back to full power and fired a final burst that forced the insurgents to retreat. 30 seconds. Rhodes shouted from below. Arya brought the aircraft back down into the extraction zone, hovering steady despite smoke, fire, and incoming rounds framing the air around her. The Marines threw the last injured soldier onto the ramp as Rhodes leaped in behind them. "Go! Go! Go!" Arya didn't wait. With a sharp lift of the controls, she pulled the aircraft out of the kill zone. Engines screaming as the valley walls fell away beneath them. Behind her, soldiers gasped for breath, not from fear, but from awe. They realized no one else could have done what she just did. No one else would have even tried. The aircraft touched down, just as the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the desert in silent shades of gold. The engines whined down slowly, their fading roar replaced by the ragged breathing of soldiers who had just survived, something they weren't sure they'd ever walk away from. Dust billowed across the landing pad as the ramp lowered, releasing the team into the cool morning air. Every step they took felt heavier than before, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of realization. Captain Rhodes climbed out last, helping the rescued soldiers toward the medics. But even he kept glancing toward the cockpit, where Arya powered down her systems with the same steady calm she had displayed in the valley. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't seek praise. She simply moved with quiet purpose, as if saving dozens of lives was nothing more than fulfilling a responsibility she had never once shied away from. When she finally stepped off the aircraft, the same briefing room personnel who laughed at her hours earlier stood silently nearby. No one dared meet her eyes at first. Shame had a way of gripping even the toughest men by the throat. The ones who made jokes about her size, her quietness, her presence, they now watched the very woman who flew them through hell like she was sculpted from steel and instinct. Rhodes broke the silence. He stepped forward, boots crunching on the gravel, and snapped into a crisp salute, not casual, not friendly, but the kind reserved only for warriors who had earned unquestioned respect. Arya blinked, hesitating for the first time that night, but returned the salute with a small, humble nod. "You didn't just fly the mission," Rhodes said, his voice low but heavy with sincerity. "You carried every one of us home." The soldiers around him began removing their helmets. One by one, slowly, like a quiet admission that they owed her more than words could cover. A few approached her, mumbling apologies they couldn't fully articulate. Others simply stood in a loose circle, giving her the space soldiers offer only to those they honor. Arya didn't gloat or remind them of their earlier laughter. She didn't need to. Her actions had rewritten the room's memory of her forever. Without saying a word, she walked past them, heading toward the hangar as the sun rose behind her, casting her shadow long and unbroken across the ground dot from that day forward. Whenever the SEAL captain asked for a pilot, no laughter ever followed, because they all knew the quiet woman who once rose from the corner didn't need applause to prove she belonged among the legends. She already was one.